Hello, I'm Mark Ells, Town Manager, and I'm here to provide my community update for this first week of August. Uh, we're still in we're still actively responding to the COVID situation here in Massachusetts and across our nation. Certainly, Barnstable is following the orders and directives of its governor. And right up front, I wanted to share with you a letter I got from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. A timely letter. It's about gatherings and graduation ceremonies, and I think it's worth sharing with you. Um, the letter reads, the Commonwealth has issued guidance around holding large gathering and graduation ceremonies to allow people to celebrate special occasions in a responsible way. We know that this time of year is usually filled with celebrations, and we are grateful for the many residents of the Commonwealth who have followed the guidance to keep people safe. However, we are increasingly hearing disturbing reports of large gatherings, including high school graduation events, where individuals are not wearing coverings or socially distancing. This behavior can dramatically accelerate the spread of COVID 19. The Commonwealth's current guidance limits indoor gatherings to no more than 25 people and outdoor gatherings to 100 people. Graduation ceremonies can also be held under specific guidelines issued by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So you may want to go and take a look at what those guidelines are on the state website. Please take this opportunity to remind your residents, your families, your students of these guidelines. The residents of the Commonwealth work hard over the past few months to bring down the number of positive cases and slow the spread of the virus. That progress cannot be lost because of the actions of a few, and everyone needs to do their part to protect their families, friends, and their neighbors and communities. So please continue to take, to take proper precautions, follow protocols, wear the required face coverings when you cannot properly distance from others. That is required in Massachusetts. It's not a suggestion. It's been required since May. Um, there is the ability now to go online and to report to the state violations both of business and violations of just regular people. Anybody anywhere. There's two different ways to log those complaints. So I again would encourage you to go to the COVID website at mass.gov. Once you get on to mass.gov, it's really easy to find. It's right there. And you can search out and look at all of the different orders, directives, these various links relevant to complaints, relevant to listing of various requirements that we have right now. The requirements are significant for us all. And so one of the other requirements that I referred to last week in my update had to do with the governor's travel order, and especially here in Massachusetts. But we can jump quickly. Many times we just think about, okay, I live in Massachusetts, I live on the Cape, lots of people come here, and I know that the governor says they're required to quarantine for 14 days if they don't come from, another state where it's been deemed safe. But you may also have a child who is going off to college. So now you have to think of this in the reverse way. You have to think to yourself, where are they going? What will the requirements be? And how will it impact me? Well, I can tell you that in Massachusetts, um, all the New England states, New Jersey, New York, and Hawaii are considered safe states. So if you're coming home from there and it's been direct, from one point to another and doesn't involve any of the other states and stopping and staying, you're not required to quarantine at this time. I would qualify that though and say to you that that changes. The list can change. So again, you need to take personal responsibility. You need to be looking at the state website and you need to be understanding. I would recommend regularly, especially if you're traveling, regularly to see what's changed. Because we're all listening to the news and we all know that the increases in various states vary. And we are definitely seeing increases in many states. So that means that a state could come off the list or another state could go on the list, so you're not required to quarantine. Please also know that if you don't follow the proper procedure in Massachusetts, and that includes filing a Massachusetts travel form if you're coming from one of these states outside of the ones that are safe, you could be fined $500 per day. So please be advised of this. This isn't something this is serious. This is real. This is serious. So please look. On the college side, I would advise you all that you should be looking at what the requirements of that state are. Just because you can go from Vermont to Massachusetts, meaning somebody could visit us from Vermont and they don't have to quarantine for 14 days, don't assume that if you're going from here to Vermont, that the same rules apply. Every state has its own rules. So you have to look at the state that you're going to, whether it's Rhode Island, the immediately abutting or not. I believe Maine won't let Massachusetts in without quarantining for 14 days. Other states are different. And like, for example, in Vermont, I believe they have different codings per number of cases. And I believe Cape Cod is a yellow. Green would be the best. Basically, you can go from a green area to Vermont from Massachusetts and not have to quarantine. Cape Cod isn't green. Cape Cod is yellow. So if you go up there, you have to quarantine. There are some other provisions in there that might not require you to. Again, that's one state to a different state. Everyone is different. Please look. You don't want to be fined, penalized, not able to return to work as a result of something that perhaps you've done every summer and there has been no ill effect from it. Or you assumed something because of the way Massachusetts was doing it and thought that it applied in another state. Adults take personal responsibility. I'll also share with you that there seems to be a large number of people who think, and these aren't people visiting the Cape, because I get to look at all of the responses that we have relevant to behavior. Specifically, I'm talking about at our beaches right now. These aren't people from anywhere else. These are residents, homeowners in Barnstable, and they've lost their beach privileges. Combination of things. It could be a trespass and loss of sticker. It could just be loss of beach sticker. Somehow they think that they don't have to follow the rules, and by arguing and saying that they're going to call up somebody and I'm going to do what I want, somehow that will prevail. Let me assure you, it will not. And I just encourage you all to take personal responsibility and to listen to our people. I guarantee you the first part of their discussion with you will be one to inform and ask you to comply with something perhaps that you are not complying with. When it escalates to engaging our security on the beaches and our police and our supervisors, and in fact, the one I observed was at Colville's Beach, and so I stood there and observed what occurred. We are going to take those more severe actions, and they will not be reversible for whatever the period of that action is. So I share that with you because this is a serious matter. And if we take it lightly, you know what the end results of that may be. So again, please take personal responsibility. The majority of people are we can't thank them enough for being supportive of what we're doing out there, trying to protect public health and safety, but also allow people to enjoy this beautiful town of ours. And certainly at our beaches, at our marinas, out on Sandy Neck, etc. So help us and stay well. And I look forward to my next update. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Meg Mayo Brown with this week's update on reopening Barnstable Public Schools. So what's new for this week's update? A couple of things. Tonight there is a school committee meeting. The school committee meeting is available via live stream on Channel 18. The best way to find Channel 18, if you're not familiar with it, is probably to Google Channel 18 Barnstable, which will bring you to hopefully the site, and then you can select live watching to catch the meeting that begins at 7 p.m. this evening. Or you can follow the link here that's on the screen, which will also take you to the channel for live streaming. The school committee is meeting tonight as to review, discuss, and deliberate the comprehensive fall reopening plan that's due to the Department of Education on August 10th. The school committee won't be approving the plan in its entirety. Rather, the school committee will approve or discuss and then approve with or without modification the school year calendar. And that brings me to the next bullet item on the screen, revisions to school calendar as a result of Commissioner's adjustment to the school year calendar. We'll talk about that in a bit, but that will be the action item for tonight. But it's also an opportunity for the public to hear us present the comprehensive fall reopening plan and all of its components and elements. In today's update, I have for you some sample student schedules that we can go over. And those, again, we'll go over in far greater detail tonight at the school committee meeting. And then I have some additional information on each of our learning models for in-person, hybrid, and remote, and an update on transportation. So here are the elements of our comprehensive fall reopening plan. We plan on publishing it on our website later today. We're just in the midst of doing some final formatting and touch-ups to it for public presentation. So again, hopefully by end of today, it'll be available on our website. The components of our plan include the process that we used for developing our fall reopening plan, the academic calendar, the learning models with sample schedules, expectations and protocols for health and safety requirements. We've gone over those in previous updates in terms of 6 feet of physical distancing, mask wearing, hand hygiene, and a culture of staying home when you are feeling ill or sick. There's also some information in our plan about teaching and learning for students with disabilities and our English language learners, as well as transportation and technology. I can't emphasize enough that our reopening plan remains fluid and is a work in progress. New information comes to us that we need to then review and incorporate in our plan. That's sort of the work in progress. And I'm going to continue to flag for everyone that the plan is fluid because we've really designed it and aligned it to be so that we can use our most current public health data in our region and community to make determinations. So we're prepared to be flexible and act in accordance with the public health data at the time of reopening. So here's the school year calendar. It does look a little different than what if you've watched last week's update, there have been some adjustments, primarily because the Commissioner of Education revised the school year calendar at the state level for all students to allow for additional staff days. Typically, students need to attend school for 180 days. The Commissioner has reduced that to 170 days, again, to allow for an additional 10 days prior to the school year so that schools can prepare for the return of students to in-person learning. So what that means for Barnstable Public Schools is that our students will begin their remote learning phase on September 16th. This is a change. The last calendar that you would have seen from us indicated that students were beginning their remote learning on September 14th. Again, remote learning will begin on September 16th. Because of the 10 days, we actually have 13 staff days in the calendar. So the remaining 3 staff days we're going to build in as professional development days on November 23rd and 24th. We hope that that's helpful to our families. That's actually during the week of Thanksgiving. So schools would be closed to students for the week of Thanksgiving, and then again on March 17th. Any of these changes to the calendar require the vote of the Barnstable School Committee, again, which is a topic for discussion for this evening. And again, the phasing calendar assumes positive public health metrics and air quality assessments within our school buildings. So just to quickly review, students would start all students would start their remote learning with us on September 16th, with the exception of the NEC program. It's noted over here that our NEC program students, we are not envisioning that they would participate in remote learning at this time. Rather, they would begin their in-person learning on September 16th. But for all other students, there's a period of phase-in where students begin with remote learning only, regardless of their cohort assignment. And that remote learning takes place on September 16th through Friday, September 25th. Then, beginning on September 28th, we're in a 2-week phase of a reduced school day for all students who are engaged in in-person learning. We envision that the reduced school day is approximately 4 hours. Again, that gives us time at the end of the day with our staff to assess our protocols and to make any adjustments that we may need to make on the spot that day so that we're prepared the following day with our protocol adjustments. When you have an opportunity to review our plan in detail, you'll see that we have many, many, many protocols in place, from mask wearing to transitions to arriving and dismissal, to how students are seated in a classroom, where lunch is had, how students go and use the restroom. So all of those protocols were developed when school was not in session. We're going to want an opportunity to review those protocols once we have had students in school to see if we need to make any adjustments. So we appreciate your understanding that reduced school day for a period of 2 weeks will allow us the time to make any necessary adjustments to our protocol. Again, all in the spirit of prioritizing health and safety for all of our students and all of our staff. And then looking back at the calendar on October 13th, again, this is assuming that public health metrics hold in a manner that allows us to continue to reopen in person. But on October 13th, students would begin their learning model as fully implemented. I want to go over a couple of sample schedules. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these for this update, just in the spirit of time. Again, these sample schedules will be presented at tonight's school committee meeting. Our Assistant Superintendent, Kristen Harmon, will go into these schedules in greater detail than I'm going to do in the update. But here's a sample hybrid schedule for Barnstable United Elementary School. I want to draw your attention to the color coding of green and blue. The green indicates asynchronous learning or independent work, and the blue indicates synchronous. Again, the difference between those is sort of what's happening live versus what's happening offline. So synchronous learning is live learning through a variety of technology formats. As you look at this schedule for Barnstable United, and that's again for our 4th and 5th graders, you'll see that we have devoted some of the time to synchronous learning, again, the blue, and then some of the time for green. The reason that we divided our asynchronous and synchronous time in this manner for students who are in the remote phase of their hybrid learning is because the feedback we received from parents was, we needed to up the amount of synchronous learning opportunities for students. However, parents do not want their children sitting in front of a computer screen for 6 hours a day. So we've attempted here to do that, to do a balance. Again, a work in progress. We'll be very interested in our student feedback and our parent and family feedback around the ratio that we're looking at. We're also working with the Barnstable Teachers Association through the collective bargaining process around working conditions for teachers as we seek to implement a hybrid model. You'll notice on the schedule that Wednesdays, again, are devoted to professional development time and training. However, we've also included that it's an opportunity for our educators to do check-ins with small groups of students for support. So we've built that in as well. Again, that's in response to the feedback that we received from our parents and families about remote learning in the past and what you would be looking for your children moving forward. Here's a sample schedule for Barnstable Intermediate School. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but you can see, again, how we are thinking about asynchronous learning and synchronous learning during the course of a school day. So again, this is for students who are in the hybrid model, and the expectations that we would have for students in terms of participating on their remote days with their classes at BIS. And again, here's a sample schedule for the hybrid model at the high school, drawing your attention again to the green and blue to indicate asynchronous and synchronous. Students at the high school will follow their schedule in over a 2-day period. So if a student is in cohort A and they are attending school Mondays and Tuesdays and they're remote Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on Monday, you can see here the student would follow their schedule in the following manner: A block, B block. We've got some intervention time and lunchtime in there, C block. Then when they come back to school for in-person learning on Tuesday, they continue with their schedule for D block, E block, F block, and G block. It is in this manner that students can continue to take their 7 courses that they selected for their high school experience, but we are taking those 7 courses and really structuring them over a span of 2 days for in-person, and then students would, on their remote days for Thursday and Friday, again, if I'm a student in cohort A, I'm in person here, on Thursday and Friday, I then become remote for my high school. But again, I'm not going to go into great detail here. I'm sure there's a number of questions about this. We'll have some more specific communication coming out from the high school about the hybrid model. And here's a sample schedule for remote. So this is for students that are going to be engaged with us for 100% of the time remotely for our youngest learners in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. Again, you can see how we're thinking about synchronous learning and asynchronous learning for students, but this is what we envision to be a very typical schedule for our students at the elementary level that provides structure to their day and provides synchronous learning opportunities as well. And then here's a sample schedule for if a student is in cohort D, again, which is fully remote. Again, you can get a sense here in terms of what a typical day might look like for a student who is learning remotely. A few considerations about remote learning before I go on. I just want to be sure that our families understand. So we've designed remote learning for the following reasons. It may be for individual students who require or choose a remote learning option, or for symptomatic students who need a short-term remote learning option during isolation, or for asymptomatic students who come in contact with a COVID-19 carrier and need a short-term remote learning option during isolation. and for all of our students in the event of a future classroom or school closure due to COVID-19. We're building our remote learning around the need to pivot into any of these situations. So remote learning will certainly be available for our cohort D students who want to choose that as a learning option, but it also needs to be available for these other circumstances that we've listed here. I do need our families to understand, and I've quoted it here out of the Department of Education guidance, that parents and caregivers have the option to choose a district's remote learning program for their child's instruction if they prefer, with the understanding that remote learning program may not provide as robust offerings as or replace the full benefits of learning in person. So in other words, if I think about the high school level, although this is still very much under discussion and a work in progress, if your child is choosing the remote only option for high school, they may not have access to all of the high school courses that we currently offer in person. But again, we're trying to work through that. And then we also need families to understand that students enrolled in remote learning may not receive instruction from a teacher in their particular school. So we will have remote learning only teachers. And if you are in cohort D, those are your teachers. They may or may not be from your child's school. It just depends on the staff that we have available, and that's a human resource matter for us that we're currently working through. And then just to jump back into the remote learning schedules again, here's a remote learning schedule for what it might look like for a student at Barnstable Intermediate School. Again, you see the balance there between synchronous and asynchronous work. We've noted here on the side, the schedule will align to the in-person school schedule. More about that in a follow-up communication. And then remote only for the high school. Again, as I mentioned just previously, bear with us on the high school. We are trying to work through that because of the comprehensive nature of our high school, the number of course offerings that we have, the levels of courses that we have. This is just a very complex problem-solving process that we're engaged in, trying to make the option viable for our students while still offering a number of courses. But this is our current thinking at this time. Again, more information, school specific, will be coming out to parents. This is just intended to provide you a bit of an overview. And then this this graphic hopefully looks familiar to our parents. This describes our in-person and hybrid models. Again, this is our current thinking. Students at the Ena Cobb Early Learning Center, we would very much like to prioritize in-person learning for them. Certainly the state guidance has indicated that preschool programming as it is at Ena Cobb should be a strong priority for districts. So we're prioritizing that area. We believe that in-person learning is doable at our 5 elementary schools, our K through 3 elementary schools, while honoring our 6 feet of physical distancing, mask wearing, hand hygiene protocols. Because of the size of BUE, BIS, and Barnstable High School, because of the size of enrollment and the number of students we have in those buildings, we cannot bring everyone back and honor our commitment to physical distancing of 6 feet. Therefore, those schools remain in the hybrid model. So our in-person model at Ena Cobb and our K3 elementary schools continues to be 4 days a week with remote learning on Wednesdays. Our hybrid model, no changes from last week's update. Students would be assigned to either an A cohort or a B cohort at BUE, BIS, and BHS with remote learning on Wednesdays. Again, A cohort attends school on Mondays and Tuesdays and learns remotely Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. B cohort is just the reverse, attends school on Thursdays and Fridays in person and learns remotely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Cohort C, we have not yet determined the students who will be in cohort C. We are working through that. Part of the challenge with cohort C is, again, we need to be sure that we can commit to the physical distancing requirements and other protocols that create a healthy environment. So we're working through those numbers at this time. And cohort D, again, those are our remote only. Based on the survey results that came in last week from our family survey, we had 2,300 responses. We do have 5,000 children, our students in the district, so 2,300 responses. We're a little bit under a 50% response rate to that survey, but based on that, on those survey results, it's looking as though the current thinking by our families is that 20% would be opting into a remote only learning model. Here's a little bit of information about transportation. Bus capacity is significantly reduced for physical distancing requirements. Ridership on a standard bus is now approximately 25 students. We used to be able to fit over 70 students on a bus. You can see here on the diagram at the top that the red circles are intended to be students with a monitor, which may or may not be on our buses, and the blue dot is the driver. You can see how students are seated one per row, but diagonally away from each other to, again, increase the physical distancing. Because of the reduced ridership, we are very limited in terms of what we can do. However, due to our hybrid scheduling at grades 4 through 12, it's very likely we can accommodate the request for transportation from our families. The difficulty will be at grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. We may, at this time, it's looking like we could only transport the students that are required to be transported, and those are our students who live more than 2 miles away from their school site. So I've put here, stay tuned, we're still working on this, but I do want to be transparent with our families, particularly at the K through 3 level, that we're in a bit of a jam around transportation. There's no more buses to be had. There's a the factories that manufacture buses had shut down during COVID. It would take us a year to acquire more buses for our fleet. So we have to work within the parameters that we have, and we continue to work through that. It was very helpful to see in our survey the number of families that would be willing to transport their child anyway and not take the option of the bus. I'll also note here that transportation is a school committee policy of sorts, given our bus pass situation. So I do anticipate that the school committee at some point will be revisiting our transportation policy and our transportation fees to see what we need to do if we're not able to provide transportation as we had initially anticipated prior to COVID. And our last slide is really intended to reflect next steps. So next steps are review and discussion of the plan at the school committee meeting on tonight, to finalize our reopening plan for submission to the Department of Education on August 10th. We're going to finalize our transportation capacity to be able to get that information out to parents. We do anticipate that the school committee will need to revise and/or adjust some of their policies. Again, that could be around transportation, around attendance, around some other matters that will come into play as we reopen. We are developing a form where we're going to ask parents and guardians to complete their student choice form for cohort D. Again, we need to know precisely out of the 5,000 students that we have, how many are going to be in the remote only option, because then that determines our staffing levels for that. And then we're working to determine our cohorts in A, B, C, and D by August 23rd. So that's our timeline for getting information out to all of our families in terms of which cohort your child would be in. We will implement a process where you can request a different cohort, and we'll take a look at that on a case-by-case basis. But before we start that process, we want to be able to give out cohort assignments. So that is this week's update. Again, I want to thank everyone for your patience and understanding as we navigate through the many challenges of reopening school in the midst of a global pandemic. We're doing so with the priority of health and safety first, and that informs all of our decision making as we consider our reopening plans. Thank you.